Again, my name is Noorani. I run the National Immigration Forum. I've now been in D.C. a little bit longer than a year, and what I've realized is that no one day, no 1 week is the same. And 3 weeks ago, we were quite happy with the administration. We were quite happy with the direction of the Department of Homeland Security and Secretary Napolitano. Last week, we realized we're not very happy with the rolling out of additional 287G local immigration enforcement measures, with increased conversation and talk about immigration enforcement in general without real commitment in a substantive way to immigration reform. We aren't happy. We weren't happy last week. But taking the long view, we're incredibly encouraged because we've seen a few things fall into place from the White House. Number one, the President has reached out consistently both to Latino media but also increasingly to English language media, speaking about the need for immigration reform in the context of this economic crisis. That's first and foremost, and that's a significant change from, or significant, I should say, surprise, given kind of where we are as the economy. The second, and this really revolves around this meeting that he pulled together on June 25th, by bringing together the leadership of both the House and the Senate around immigration issues, leadership from the Democratic and the Republican Party, he committed his own personal time to making sure that the process started this year. And that process is started. We all know that Senator Schumer has come out of the gates charging in terms of putting together his best thinking, starting to reach out to allies and stakeholders and saying, this is what I'm considering. We know that Chairwoman Lofgren.
Sorry, can you unmute your microphone? We can't hear you online.
Can I go mute again? There?
Yeah.
Those folks online just missed the most brilliant part of my presentation. Oh, well. We know that Chairwoman Lofgren is charging ahead. We know that she's starting to do meetings and starting to put together what her schedules of hearings is going to look like as well. But at the end of the day, the reason we're going to win, and this is what we've really shaped this campaign around, is our collective ability as stakeholders from labor, from the immigrant community, from business, from faith, et cetera, to get to one simple goal. And that simple goal is 279 votes. 279 votes. 218 in the House, 60 in the Senate, and the signature of one president. It is as simple as that. And the reason that we have created this campaign, this coalition, around that very simple numerical goal is that any one stakeholder, whether they are an interest group or a part of the map, they are able to understand and influence a set number of votes. So by looking at this through the prism of 279, we realize that we as a coalition, we as a set of stakeholders have a vested interest in being around the same table. We may not agree on everything, but we have an interest in being around the same table and being serious about winning. And I think that is the biggest difference that we're feeling at this moment, is that there are more people, there are more stakeholders, there are more champions serious about winning than ever before. And that's why we're going to win. That is why we're going to win. It's because there's a level of seriousness, of savvy, of maturity that has come to this issue because everybody sees that there's a need for a solution. So on June 1st, we joined with a broad spectrum of organizations and stakeholders from labor, AFL, United Food and Commercial Workers, United Farm Workers, SEIU, business, the agricultural employers most notably, the faith community, the evangelical Hispanics, the Jewish community, the immigrant community across the country, to launch this campaign to reform immigration for America. Reforming immigration for America. Because at the end of the day, the only reason we're going to reach those 279 votes is because we have a clear understanding that this solution that we are putting forward is in the interests of America, in the interests of the country. That way, when the opposition says, how can you push immigration reform in the light of this economic crisis, we are crystal clear of why requiring the legalization of undocumented immigrants, why the reunification of families, why a clear, safe enforcement program that's put in place, why due process measures, why all those things within immigration reform are in the best interest of America. So that is the reason why we are, why we have created this campaign, and we have created this very clear focus on reforming immigration in the interest of our country. And kind of going through these different stakeholders and measuring them against, the votes that we need, it gets, more interesting. So 218 in the House. How do we get to 218 in the House? We think that, we will need 15 to 20 additional votes with, a handful of Republicans. We know that we're going to need bipartisan support in the House as well as in the Senate. But the reality is in the House, that bill can and should be more left of center than right of center. We know that in order for Speaker Pelosi and her leadership team to move a bill through the House, it has to be cognizant of labor needs as well as business needs, but it also has to be cognizant of controlling costs and being able to articulate that there's a fiscal case for immigration reform. There's a fiscal case for immigration reform because by requiring legalization of the undocumented, you are not only bringing that community out of the shadows, but you're requiring that they pay taxes and their employers pay taxes. That is a fiscal case for immigration reform that conservative moderate Democrats, and moderate Republicans can begin to grapple with and begin to support. It is not about giving something away to the detriment of the country. It's about treating people fairly to the benefit of the country. 60 votes in the Senate. Senator Schumer has started to work with Senator Graham and others to begin to think through what this looks like. We know that it will be tough in the Senate, like it has always been tough in the Senate. And this is where the critical leadership of the business community comes into play. Because we need to have a viable future flow program that serves the interest of American employers just as much as we need to have a viable worker protection program that serves the interests of the American worker. Those are not incongruent goals. Those are not measures that need to be in opposition to each other. And since we do have this track record and history of working together, it can be done. But in the Senate, it's not going to be easy. And with the Senate moving forward on a faster timeline, that's where we need to be focusing our attention. The president, that final signature or vote, if you will. Now, while the president has gone out and invested his capital early on and his influence early on in starting the process, continuing to just talk about enforcement does not necessarily mean that reform comes forward. So as Frank Sherry said in this morning's New York Times, said something to paraphrase, to reform the 287G program without fixing the most egregious agreement with Sheriff Arpaio in Phoenix, Arizona, is not reform. So you can't be fixing enforcement, but actually just continuing enforcement. Secretary Napolitano has been tasked with convening a immigration working group for the administration, working with the House and Senate. We understand that process is starting, but we need to start seeing some real momentum and energy there so that at the end of the day, she can say and the president can say to the immigrant community that turned out in record numbers in 2008 that yes, we are going to reform the immigration system. And part of that reform is enforcement, but part of that reform is family, it's legalization, it's due process, et cetera, et cetera. You can't have one without the other. And the problem is that the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security is trying to start with the one without talking about reform. So there's a lot of work to be done there. So then, looking forward into the fall, where do we go? It's clear that as we move into the August recess that there's a lot of attention on healthcare, that there's a lot of attention on where the economy is. But at the end of the day, the fact is that we have a campaign that has 500 organizations that have endorsed it. We have over 50 events going on throughout the August recess. We are working with members of Congress, meeting with them in their districts. We're building email and cell phone lists that have been unseen by our movement in the past. So that as we come out of the August recess, members of Congress will realize that immigration reform, just like the polling indicates, is a solution that people want, at a national level, but also it is a solution that people want in their districts. So that as we go into the September, October, November, and as Senator Schumer moves forward his process, there will be a campaign ready to support his leadership. There will be a campaign ready to partner with the senator, with the Chairwoman Lofgren in the Congressional Hispanic Caucus in the House, with the Secretary Napolitano and the President, so that at the end of the day, we can get to the 279 votes. Because there are a whole lot of folks who are serious about winning. We realize that we have to find that, as Tamara put it, that balance. And those stakeholders, while that first stakeholder is the American worker, that has to be our primary interest in this. But the Democrats have to win in this. If they deliver an immigration reform solution in the interest of the country, they retain their majority. The Republicans have a lot to win in this because they have to be a part of the solution. Their current strategy around Sotomayor cannot be the outreach strategy that brings back the Republicans. Business has a lot to win from this because immigration reform has to account for the future flow of immigrants. Labor has a lot to win because immigration reform has to protect all workers, not just immigrant workers, not just native-born workers. And then finally, the immigrant community has a lot to win in this because at the end of the day, people are terrified. People are terrified. They are afraid of who is going to knock at their door. And it's not just the undocumented who are afraid. It is the documented too. So when you have somebody like Sheriff Arpaio in Arizona who is knocking on doors asking for documentation, whether or not that person is legal, that is a terrifying reality that millions and millions and millions of people are living through. So to eliminate that injustice, that inequity, not only serves the immigrant community, but serves everybody. And we believe that this broad coalition focused on getting to 279 votes will move that solution forward and at the end of the day make the country better at the local level as well as at the national level.